A great way to support our salty gameplay is by building your next deck using our TCG Player affiliate link provided in the description below. Now let's get into the game.
What's up, Salt fam? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Table Salt EDH.
Salt Lords!
Salty!
Fuck yeah.
Not quite Kaldheim time yet, but we're getting close. This week, we actually have an episode for you that's more commanders that we think we like. More personally, you understand?
Hey everyone, Dom here, and today I'm playing Chulane, Teller of Tales. Goal of this deck, play a lot of shit, then use that to play more shit, then keep playing shit until you win.
What's up, everybody? Keith back. And this week I'm playing Smashy and Sashy one more time. And all I'm going to be doing is fucking playing Vial Smasher, playing Sashy, cloning the Vial Smasher, getting a whole bunch of Vial Smasher triggers, and just slinging that big old dick.
Today I'm playing Gitrog and I'm mad at my dad. Today, after I listen to Taking Back Sunday, I'm playing Gitrog. Two things I'm doing today: playing Gitrog and listening to Bright Eyes.
Boy, do I got a surprise for you. Today I'm playing my Boros deck to Feather Oompa Loompa Doompa Dee Doo. Can't get that name. Or not.
I wish I had shaved because, like, you know, kids are like fucking smooth as a baby's ass.
Fucking bro.
Well,
Dude, it was just a
fucking
joke.
joshing you, dude.
It was just a joke, bro. It's just a prank.
are we ready to go?
Let's fucking roll.
Ready?
Alright, I'm going to draw. I get to play Leyland of Anticipation since it was in my opening hand.
You cheating fuck.
I
Bullshit.
fucking shuffled in front of you guys and I showed you right away so you know. I wasn't
100%
cheating.
cheated.
He did actually.
And then I will play Dismal Backwater tapped and I will gain 1 life. So I'm now at 41 life.
My oh my. Are you done?
Not yet. Now I'm done.
Evolving Wilds, and I'm gonna tap sack it, and I'm gonna go look for.
You're gonna sack tap it?
I'm gonna sack and then tap it. I'm gonna go look for planes. I'm done. Pass turn.
I'm a draw. Woo! You guys ready for
No.
this?
Ready?
Don't do it.
I'm gonna play a command
God,
tower.
everyone's fucking cheaters, aren't they?
I'm gonna tap 1 for Ruin Crab.
Oh, gross.
Then I'm gonna pass.
Now
Yeah.
it's me.
Now it's you, buddy.
All
Sea
right.
Sailor.
I'm gonna play Drown Yard Temple, and then I'm gonna be done.
All right, we got those niceties out of the way, so let's get this bad boy rolling. Keith plays a command tower and then passes his turn. Sean plays an Inspiring Vantage untapped because he controls 2 or fewer lands. He then taps 2 and casts a Talisman of Conviction. He then passes his turn. Dom plays an island, triggering Ruin Crab, causing everyone to mill 3. He then taps it for a Soul Ring, and then taps his command tower to cast a Soul Warden. He passes his turn. Sterling plays a Swamp, and then he taps 2 to cast a Perpetual Timepiece. At the end of Sterling's turn, Keith taps 2 to flash out a Talisman of Creativity. Keith draws, plays an island, and then passes his turn. Sean starts his turn by playing a mountain. Sean then taps 3, tapping the Talisman of Conviction for a white mana. He forgets to ping himself for 1. Oh, come on, dude, you're better than this. He casts his commander, Feather the Redeemed, and then taps a mountain to cast a Samut's Sprint targeting Feather, giving him +2, +1, and haste, also allowing him to scry.
On the on when you're casting that,
Wait, don't counter it. I'm not going to attack you. Don't counter
Yeah,
it, please.
that's what I wanted to know. Okay.
Oh, God, thank you. Whew. All right. All right, so I'm scrying. I'm going, ooh. Oh, goodness. He leaves the card on top, and then swings a 5/4 flying feather in the air at Dom. Samut's Sprint then goes into exile per the feather trigger, to be returned to Sean's hand at the beginning of the next end step. He becomes the Monarch, and then passes his turn. Dom plays an Exotic Orchard, triggering Ruin Crab and milling everybody for 3. He then taps 3 to cast a Shaman of the Forgotten Ways. He misses his Soul Warden trigger that would gain him 1 life. He then swings the Soul Warden at Sean to steal the Monarch, dealing him 1 damage. He passes his turn and draws a card. Sterling starts his turn by playing an Emergence Zone. He then taps the Perpetual Timepiece to mill himself for 2, and then passes his turn. At the end of Sterling's turn, Keith taps 3 to flash out Vial Smasher the Fierce. Dom gains 1 life to the Soul Warden trigger, and then Keith untaps and draws, starting his turn. Keith plays a mountain, and then passes the turn. Sean plays a Needle Spires tapped, and then swings a 3/4 flying feather at Dom. Dom, it's got to be you, buddy.
No, it doesn't.
Absolutely, 100%.
You are
has to
choosing.
be
It
you.
does not have
You
to
are
be.
milling me. You are gaining life when people play creatures, and you can literally nuke us with that one forgotten shaman bullshit thing. So yeah, no, it's got to be you.
Just sink your teeth
Any
in, Sean.
effects?
Sink it in.
Any effects, Dom?
If you kill me early, I will delete everyone's files.
Says the guy with 2 wins on this channel already.
Yeah, but they were long, well fought wins.
Well, this one's not going to be long, but it will be well fought. Dom has no effects, so Sean taps for a red to cast a Samut's Sprint targeting Feather, giving it +2. He scries, leaves that card on top, and then Dom takes 5 commander. Sean then taps for a red to cast Vial targeting Feather, pinging it for 1, giving it useless trample, but drawing a card. He is now the Monarch, and he passes his turn drawing a card. Dom starts his turn by tapping Shaman of the Forgotten Ways for a green and a blue. He then adds 3 to cast Chulane, triggering Soul Warden and gaining a life. He then taps 2 to cast an Arcane Signet, and then Keith, in an unbelievably salty move, taps 3 to cast Unwind, countering the Arcane Signet and untapping 3 lands. He gets a Vial Smasher trigger, rolls a die to assign damage, and then deals 3 to Sterling.
Are you done after that, Dom?
I don't know. No, I was not going to play a land to try and avoid that.
Dude.
I'm already at 10 commander damage. Sean, can you not swing at me if I don't play a land?
Okay, buddy, here's my dilemma. I want to win this motherfucking game. I think I'm going to have a real hard time doing it if I keep showing mercy and veering Feather away from its primary targets. Right now, you are
okay.
by far the biggest threat on the board. Keith is all randomized damage, so he's not necessarily a large threat to me, and Sterling hasn't built up yet. So you are fully within the crosshairs of Feather right now, and I don't think it would be wise for me to change targets.
Also, it's Table Salt EDH. Someone's got to be salty.
Dom plays a Prairie Stream tapped, triggering Ruin Crab, and milling everybody for 3. He then swings the Soul Warden at Sean to steal back the Monarch, dealing him 1 damage. He then passes his turn and draws a card. Oop, just completely bashed my mic. Okay, stabilized. Sterling plays a Terramorphic Expanse and then passes his turn. At the end of his turn, Keith taps 4 to flash out Sakashima. Getting a Vial Smasher trigger and rolling a die to assign damage, he deals 4 damage right to Dom's face. Keith then follows suit by only playing an island for his turn and then passes. At the end of his turn, Sean taps 2 to cast a Feat of Resistance targeting Feather. He gives Feather a +1/+1 counter and protection from some random color, but arbitrary at this point, and then untaps and draws for turn. Sean starts by playing a mountain. He then adds a red to cast Samut's Sprint targeting Feather, giving it +2/+1 and scrying. He leaves the card on top, and then adds 2 to cast a Boros Charm, giving Feather double strike. This is enough for lethal, hitting Dom for 12 more commander, and then Dom does what we all know and love, the salty scoop. At the end of Sean's turn, Sterling sacrifices his Evolving Wilds to go look for a forest. He also taps his Perpetual Timepiece to mill himself for 2. Sean then forgets to become the Monarch and draw his card, because, you know, we're kind of on that vibe for this game. And then Sterling untaps and draws for his turn. Sterling then taps 3 to cast a Cultivate. He looks for a forest to put onto the battlefield, and another forest goes into his hand. He then plays a swamp, and then taps 2 to cast Stitch Together. He brings an Underworld Lich from his graveyard to the battlefield, and then passes his turn. At the end of Sterling's turn, Keith taps 3 to cast a Glasspool Mimic. He gets a Vial Smasher and a Sakashima trigger, and then rolls a die to assign damage. He deals 3 to Sean, and then 3 to Sterling. Keith plays a swamp, and then taps out to cast Torment of Hellfire with X equal to 5. He gets 3 triggers from Vial Smasher, Sakashima, and Glasspool Mimic, and then rolls a die to assign damage. Giving Sterling evens and Sean odds, Keith then proceeds to roll odds 3 times in a row and deals 21 damage straight to Sean's face. The Torment of Hellfire resolves, and Sean discards Seize the Day, Aurelia's Fury, and a mountain, also losing 6 life. Sterling discards an Oracle of Moldiah, a return to nature, and then loses 9 life. Keith then passes his turn. At the end of Keith's turn, Sean, trying to squeeze as much value out of his cards as possible, taps 3 to cast a Samut Sprint, just for the scry effect, leaves the card on top, and then casts a Feat of Resistance, just to put a +1/+1 counter on Feather. He then untaps and draws. Sean, tasting blood in the water, goes straight to combat and swings Feather at Keith. With no effects, Sean then adds 1 to cast a Samut Sprint, adding 2 and scrying. He then adds 2 more to cast a Boros Charm, giving Feather double strike. He smacks Keith for 14 in the air commander, and then taps 3 to flashback Seize the Day from his graveyard. This gives a second combat step to Sean, and he swings again once more at Keith for 14 commander in the air. With 2 down, Keith joins Dom and does the salty scoop. Sean plays the plains, and then as he passes the turn, Sterling hits the perpetual timepiece to mill himself for 2. Sterling untaps and draws, triggering the Underrealm Lich. He draws 3, puts 2 into the graveyard and 1 into his hand. He then plays a forest, and then taps 5 to cast the Gitrog Frog. He then hits the perpetual timepiece to mill himself for 2. A land enters the graveyard this way and triggers the Gitrog Frog. He draws a card, and then triggers the Underrealm Lich, drawing 3 cards instead. He puts 2 into the graveyard and 1 into his hand. He then swings the Underrealm Lich at Sean, dealing him 4 damage and becoming the Monarch. He goes to pass, but at the end of his turn, Sean taps 1 to cast a Sheltering Light targeting Feather. It gives Feather indestructible, and he scries, choosing to put the card on the bottom of his library. Sean goes straight to combat and swings Feather in the air at Sterling. With no additional effects, he taps to add a red and casts Samut Sprint targeting Feather, giving it +2 and scrying. He puts the card on the bottom, and then passes priority to Sterling. Sterling taps 2 to cast a Constant Mists, paying its buyback cost by sacrificing a land and preventing all combat damage dealt to him this turn. Sean then taps 5 to cast a Chandra's Ignition targeting Feather, dealing 7 damage to each other creature and each opponent. He then taps to add a white and casts a Favored Hoplite. Sean then passes his turn. Sterling untaps and draws, and then drops a swamp as his land per turn. He then taps 3 to cast a Pulse of Marasa, gaining 6 life and returning the Gitrog Frog back to his hand. He hits the Perpetual Timepiece to mill himself for 2, and then passes the turn. Sean starts his turn by paying 1 to cast a Samut Sprint, again targeting Feather. Giving it +2 and scrying, he puts the card to the bottom of his library. He then taps 5 to cast a Chandra's Ignition,
Hot and fresh out the
targeting
kitchen.
Feather, dealing 7 damage to each opponent and each other creature. The Favored Hoplite dies, and Sterling chooses to let the Underrealm Lich die. Sean then goes to pass his turn, and Sterling taps 3 to cast a Putrefy, targeting Feather. In response, Sean pays 1 to cast a Sheltering Light, also targeting Feather, giving it indestructible and protecting it from the Putrefy. He scries, and moves the card to the bottom of his library. Sterling taps 5 to cast the Gitrog Frog, and then plays Evolving Wilds to immediately tap and sack it, triggering the Gitrog Frog to draw a card, and looking for a forest. It enters the battlefield tapped, and then he hits the Perpetual Timepiece to mill himself for 2. He mills a land, and then draws an additional card per the frog. He then taps 1 to cast a Reclaim, returning the Pulse of Marasa to the top of his library. He then plays a Lotus Field as an additional land per turn, thanks to the frog, sacrificing 2 lands, triggering the Gitrog Frog and triggering Sean. He draws 2 cards and then passes his turn. Sean starts his turn by paying 1 to cast a Brute Force targeting Feather, giving it +3/+3 until end of turn. He then goes to combat, swinging at Sterling. Sterling then taps 2 to cast Constant Mists, sacrificing a land for its buyback cost. After combat damage is prevented, Sean taps 5 to cast a Chandra's Ignition, dealing 8 damage to each other creature and each opponent. The frog dies, goes back to the command zone, and Sterling takes 8. Sean passes, and Sterling starts his turn. Sterling untaps, and on his upkeep, hits the Perpetual Timepiece to mill himself for 2. He then draws per turn, and then drops a command tower as his land per turn. He then taps the Lotus Field to cast a Pulse of Marasa, gaining 6 life and returning a swamp to his hand. He then taps 1 to cast a crop rotation, sacrificing the command tower, and starts searching his deck for a Temple of the False God, which he then remembers he does not have in this deck. So guess what? He gets a forest instead. Solid consolation prize? He then taps 4 to cast a Dread Return. Targeting the Eternal Witness in his graveyard, he puts it back onto the battlefield to Sean's dismay, returning a Pulse of Marasa to his hand. He then taps 1 to play the Spore Frog, and then passes his turn. Sean untaps, draws, and then like a broken record, taps 1 to cast a Brute Force, and then taps 5 to cast a Chandra's Ignition, dealing 8 damage to Sterling and each other creature. He then passes his turn, missing yet another land drop. Sterling starts his turn by dropping a Swamp, and then taps 3 to cast the Pulse of Marasa, yet again, gaining 6 life, but this time in his excitement forgetting to return a card from his graveyard to his hand. Somehow still clinging on to this game, he then taps 2 to cast a Reanimate, bringing the Eternal Witness back to the battlefield, and in turn returning the Pulse of Marasa to his hand. As if we're stuck in a time loop, he taps 3 to cast Pulse of Marasa yet again, gaining 6 additional life and returning a command tower to his hand. As Sterling passes his turn, Sean remembers that he can cast Sheltering Light for 1 to not only give Feather indestructible but also scry, digging oh so desperately for that land he needs to close out the game. Sean untaps and draws, and immediately transforms into Sad Sean because he did not draw a land, and he must do the exact same thing he's been doing the past, I don't know, 3-4 turns now? Where are we? What year is this? He pays 1 to cast a Brute Force targeting Feather, giving it +3/+3, and then taps 5 to cast a Chandra's Ignition, dealing 8 damage to each other creature and 8 damage directly to Sterling's face for the second time, third time. This card's been cast a lot this game. With nothing else to do, Sean passes the turn. Sterling untaps, drops a command tower, and then pays 1 to cast a Reanimate, targeting the Eternal Witness in his graveyard. He loses 3 life and returns it to the battlefield, and then brings back, gee, I wonder what, to his hand. He taps 3 to play the card that shall not be named, gaining 6 life and bringing the Fog Frog back to his hand. Sterling taps 1 to play the Fog Frog, and then hits the Perpetual Timepiece to mill himself for 2. He goes to pass his turn, and at the end of his turn, Sean taps 1 to Path to Exile the Eternal Witness, wanting no more to do with this bullshit shenanigans nonsense. The Eternal Witness is exiled, and Sterling puts a Swamp onto the battlefield. Sean goes to untap, and draws into the sweetest, most angelic mountain you done ever did see. He then preps that cadence we all know and love by tapping 1 to cast a Brute Force, and then tapping 5 to cast Chandra's Ignition, dealing 8 damage to each other creature and 8 damage to Sterling. In response, Sterling sacks the Spore Frog to make sure Feather can't get through with the game-winning blow, but that's not what Sean had in mind. He then instead, with that brand new bright and shiny mountain he played earlier, taps 2 to cast a Boros Charm, dealing 4 damage right to Sterling's beautiful John, and he wins the game. Alright, anyways. Thank you so much, Salt Lords, for tuning in. Obviously, 2021's off to a hot start with a win for Sterling, and then of course a win for ya boy Sean. Be sure to tune in next time because we got a special one coming for you. We all know that Kaldheim's dropping soon, so everyone stay tuned for our next set release gameplay video. And as always, thanks for watching.
Through test of will right there, dude.
Fucking work for it, I had to. I wanted to scoop like so many times during that
For
game.
both of you guys, actually, man. That was like a well-fought game.
So
I'm glad you didn't.
I just needed that fucking mountain so I could have casted the Boros
Should we
Charm.
stop recording?
Oh, yeah.
Oh shit, yeah.
Oh shit, what'd I miss? Guys? Hello? Ah,